yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Welcome to Against the Grain, where curiosity leads the way.
Hi, Peter.
Hi,
Thanks so
Gary.
much for
Thank
joining
you.
me.
I'm
How you doing?
fine. How are you?
Yeah. Good, thanks. Yeah, I'm really good. It's nice that I went away for the weekend, and when I came back, I saw that there'd been a new formation at Stonehenge, which you've already done some analysis on.
Awesome design. A beautiful formation. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So, okay, we've known each other quite a while now. You've been doing some geometric analysis on the crop circles for some time. Is that what got you into crop circles, or when did you start looking into them?
No, I was pretty much a clean sheet when I started looking at crop circles, and I had some knowledge about music and knew about ratios and harmonics and things like that, and that you could translate it into geometry, and that had been that had played a role in some architecture that I knew of, things like that. But other than that, no. But when I first got introduced to crop circles, I saw these drawings that some people made of that. I kind of intuitively felt that this is something that I can do. This is something that I can understand. Numbers never really clicked in my mind, but shapes and proportions, yes, that felt doable for me. Yeah.
Okay, so it was so the crop circle sort of led you into a learning process with the geometry then.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, it is more accessible, isn't it? When somebody said to me years ago, although it's obvious staring you in the face, but when someone said, geometry is number in space, and you just look at this 3 triangles, you look at space, and a square 4 is in space. It makes number sort of visual and accessible, doesn't it? In a way that's better than these abstract symbols.
As you touched upon also when you talked with Scott, I guess you this the quantity and the quality of a number, and if a number is expressed as a shape, you kind of get the feeling of it right away. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so out of the crop circles that you've analysed, and you've done quite a few now, what ones sort of stick out in your mind?
When I looked at the Queen Bee from 2004, I guess, below Milk Hill.
Below Milk Hill, okay.
And then when I looked at it, it's about a year ago, I noticed you have this head shape in the body. Perhaps you can edit the photos later in when
Sure.
And then in 2009 there was this in the same field, there was this formation with the head shape with all the glyphs in lines coming out of it.
Ah, yes, like the alien head with all the glyphs at the bottom of it.
I comparing the photos, showing that the head shape in the body of the Queen Bee and the head shape of that 2009 formation were not only at exactly the same spot, but also at the same size. It's making an intimate relation between those two, and it is things like that really stick out, because it gives the whole phenomenon. It makes it appear as a coherent whole or a coordinated event, and so
yes,
it kind of transcends the single formation and becomes more of a web-like structure. And things like that really stick out. I think if another one that really has captivated me is the formation from July 7, another July 7, then your formation. It's
Then my
July
7/7,
7,
yeah.
1994 at Barbary Castle. The dragonfly larva, as it was called, or it was associated.
Oh, I don't remember that one. 94 was
I
before my
have it
time, so I'd
tattooed
have
on
to
my
look that one
arm.
up.
That
You have it
one.
tattooed? Ah, that
Uh,
one. Okay.
if you, it's it's beyond my comprehension how one can design that. If you calculate the area of flattened crop in that design and you convert that to a square, that square is going to fit precisely inside the ring that goes around that formation. And
Is that right?
because all the elements in the design overlap each other and cross each other, designing it from that starting point becomes an incredible feat because you, I don't know how that is done. How can you design something from that starting point? You draw a circle with a square in it, and somehow there is a protocol that allows you to end up with the dragonfly larva. And that is difficult enough if you have separate elements, or it's doable, but it's kind of it becomes a complex process. But when all these elements overlap each other and don't have necessarily a logical relationship to one another, it becomes a tremendous feat of design, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing. And it just made me think of this recent analysis you've done with the Stonehenge formation, the first one, where you found that the area of the mound was similar to
Yeah.
the area of the flattened
Yeah.
crop. Is that right?
I don't know if this is kind of how accurate that would be. That would require measurements in the field, but it is close
Okay.
enough to suggest that it is intentionally done. And this goes
Wow.
through years and years of crop circles. I think the oldest formation that I've looked at where there is a logical relationship between the area of the affected area of flattened crop in relationship to the underlying design. It goes all the way back to 1987. That was the oldest formation that I have looked at, and it has been a regular feature of crop circle design. The What happens is if you draw with straight line with a ruler and compass, you tend to produce given ratios that always stand in a certain relationship with one another. And if different elements have a ratio in size, then logically they also going to have a given relationship in area. So that these
Okay.
harmonics are produced by itself is not magic or anything, but what
Mm.
is different, what is typical for the circle makers or for crop circle phenomenon is that this is a feature that is intentionally used in the design, and that's what makes it difficult or difficult for us if we were to design something like that. That's what makes it special. For example, with the recent formation at Stonehenge, we have all these kind of overlapping half circles. The arms at which these half circles are composed is not a single line, but has a certain width. It kind of complicates things if you're going to design it beforehand with that given area, the area of the tumulus in mind, and design it from that. It's kind of it's not an impossible thing to do, but it kind of complicates things and it raises the bar for anyone who would want to attempt to make a crop circle.
So the area of the tumulus, like if we, from memory, I don't remember. Is there a tram line that goes around it? Usually there is like a tractor line. So are you measuring the area from that
No, it
circle
was
made by the
the
tram
actual
lines?
tumulus.
The tumulus
you
itself.
know, you know,
The sort of base of it, where
If you
where
look
it
at it,
flattens
if
out
you
onto
look
the
at it
ground.
from a
Yeah.
satellite photo, it appears it's just a circle. So, of course, I don't. But that's the circle that seemed to have been the the, the reference in the design.
Okay. So if you were to take that area and work out the area, and then you said, like you just said, you want to take that area and go to a piece of paper and say, okay, I'm going to design a geometric construction, and I'm going to use that particular area in the components of this geometric construction, so they all add up to it. Why is that difficult? Can you give me an example why that would be tricky?
It is if you have elements that overlap each other, then the area that is affected, you have to avoid a double counting area. So when they overlap each other, you have to subtract again and all that. It becomes it's as I said, it's not impossible to do, but it raises the level of sophistication. In case of the dragonfly larva from 1994, it borders an incomprehensible level of complexity, in my opinion. It's not always that complicated. Possibly not in every design, but there are examples that really make a great impression because of that. Absolutely, no.
It makes me think of the crooked soli formation. Alan Brown saying, if you were a designer and you were asked to incorporate the numbers, 792 and 504 and 1296, and also include a mitochondrial DNA and a circle in the center that doesn't have, a central point laying it out, an area of standing crop which is circular that doesn't have a central point. To come up with that idea, to come up with that mitochondrial DNA that has those little diamonds which make up 792 and 504, and to incorporate all the coincidences that go with that, with the where it's located and the bigger landscape and so on, just raises that bar. So as you're saying these things to me, and you look at the number of formations we've had which do raise that bar, and I usually use the example of the squared circles that were discovered first of all by Michael Glickman, as you know, and then Alan Brown researching, and you go, okay, when you get solutions to an age-old problem presented to you with a relatively simple design, 5 circles, a quintuplet that solves this age-old problem in such an accurate way, accurate to the thickness of the pencil line, then it raises the intellectual profile of whoever or whatever we speculate is making these things.
Right? It's not in your face. It's something.
Right.
It's not. Yeah. It's kind of hidden, but it's something that you only find if you really engage with it and have a closer look at it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's when I first saw Janet Ossabard's book years ago, and she showed the dumbbells, the little pictograms that had the 5 pointed stars around them, and it worked out exactly where the tram lines were, and the area of a straight line was the length of that kind of grabbed me, because I thought, okay, there's something hidden here that's saying to us, if you want to look deeper, there's stuff here for you to see. So you got this level where you see the symbol in the field, and you get this experience where you say to people, or people will say to you, I think this means this, or I think that symbol is that, it's a symbol of this, and you get that kind of level of the subjective, the person bringing what they have to this symbol and saying, I think I see this in that symbol. And then when you look deeper, like you do, like Michael and Alan and John Martineau and the other people who've all looked at the geometry, Bert Janssen, you then get this more accurately chilling hidden geometry, which is this underlying structure to the whole formation, and that really grabbed me from the early days, and obviously it did you as well, because this is where the sort of meat and potatoes are, isn't it?
It adds to the whole experience. It becomes beautiful when you find also that this underlying structure is become part of the story of the reading of the formation, and I'm often also struck with the apparent simplicity of it. If I work on a crop circle and I struggle, I find it difficult or complex, I have the feeling it's not well understood. And when things fall into place, it's kind of, it remains a certain level of elemental shape and process. Like, for example, the latest, the most recent one, the square with these 4 circles on it. It's not a complicated design when you look at it, but it has a tremendous efficiency and produces a squared circle with a ridiculous accuracy as well. Although I'm not. It's not just accuracy that I'm looking for. I think it's when it comes to for example, squared circle. We kind of we tend to have a lot of focus on accuracy alone, and that says something about our culture, I think. Measuring everything,
right?
But from the viewpoint of the 3 transcendental truths, it's the good, the beautiful, and the true, right? True would be the accuracy, but you would also it's interesting to look at if it is an elegant design, or if it is if it tells a coherent story, if the squared circle is an exercise, a spiritual exercise by balancing the spiritual and the physical matter, and if that process of drawing it kind of enhances that symbolism, these things are also important. And I think a squared circle with a lower accuracy but with a beautiful, elegant design has much more to tell than just this, than accuracy alone.
That's interesting, because my teacher used to say that beauty is the pathway to truth. When you see something that's beautiful, it's pointing you towards truth. And so that follows, doesn't it? The good, the beautiful, and the true. You've got something that's good, something that's then beautiful, and then something that's then true. And the balance between those, I hadn't really thought of it in those terms. That's really nice way to look at it.
If you look at social media, where geometric things are discussed, it's always about this accuracy. But there are other things as well, because and it makes sense also. If you listen to music and sometimes a slight dissonance can really enhances a musical piece. It's not only about the beauty in things. Sometimes the sharp edge is what makes it more attractive even.
That's so true. I studied semiotics at university, and my mentor was a man called Theo van Leuven, a Dutch professor, and his book, which I still consider my Bible whenever I want to go back and try and dive into something which may have a semiotic event that I want to try and understand the meaning of more, talks about music and talks about Indian music with the raga and the drone, which begins before and then is continuous in the background. It doesn't have any beat, but this drone is this dissonant part which actually adds to the whole musical ensemble that will go through it. And then when the musical ensemble ends, the
Right.
drone is still there, as if it's this continuous part. And it's the same with I studied African music, and the djembe drum, they have these things called the seng seng, which are these like metal shields, let's say, and they've got all these little rings on them. So when you play the drum, these little rings rattle. They just make this like, and it's got no harmony to it. But when you hear the drum
The
being
whole
played
of it.
with those, and so what you're describing in a geometric way is exactly the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
as
I guess. You know, it's.
those kind of semiotic
I
events in a
think.
way.
I think I'm attracted by that tension, if you will. You know, or it's and also, you know,
Uh-huh.
if a crop circle is not perfect, you know, how do you look at it? Do you if an angle is implied, if a straight angle is implied and the real thing in the field is slightly off, how are you going to look at it? Are you
Uh-huh.
going to correct the angle in your mind, or are you going to stick with that flaw? Things like that. That tension I find kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah. So it's it's I think one is often inclined to take the easy way then, and just correct the error.
Straighten it out.
But yeah, at least try to be aware of it at least. Yeah, yeah,
That's really good. That's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah, because it would be wrong of us, wouldn't it, to when you've got something which has demonstrably shown itself to have a high level of intelligence. The author. Let's just call them the authors for now, without getting into the controversy. When you can show, as you've just suggested, with the areas and how difficult and these levels of difficulty, that there is a very clever mind behind this, then for us to presume that it's made a
right.
mistake and to
Yeah.
correct it is not the right way to go about
No,
it, really,
no,
is it?
at the same time, you know why to assume that beauty is only expressed as something perfect, things like that. You know, there are so many different aspects one can take into account.
I think of the
Right.
asymmetry of the face, the human face. If you the have you seen Clive Dunn's analysis of the pyramids of sorry, not the pharaohs in Egypt, the faces where they've got all the golden
Right.
ratios and all the proportions, but they're
Yeah.
exactly symmetrical, both sides of the face, and yet all humans pretty much,
Mm.
we have this asymmetry, which if you actually make us look symmetrical, take one
Strange.
side of the face
It's
and put it,
uncanny.
we
Yeah.
look
Right.
odd, we look
Yeah.
really weird. Yes. So I think maybe when you were saying that, then that was what was coming to my mind. Maybe that's what we're dealing with here. It's this imperfection in life which
Yeah.
actually
And
makes
interesting.
life possible
Yeah.
and interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, and beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's yeah.
that's
Um,
really cool.
yeah. It is this yeah. It tells about a life that is lived, and I think when it is expressed in art, struggle or suffering is beautifully expressed in art. And I'm not saying that an asymmetry in a crop circle necessarily expresses that, but it's more on general terms. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, yeah, yeah. It's a way of looking at it or trying to
yeah,
understand what might be being
yeah.
communicated to us in that way. Yeah. And so, I mean, these things, I've often, whenever I interview like yourself or Scott Onstott or other geometers, I say, to the lay people who've never really done anything with geometry other than work out areas for quantitative sort of means. And when you start to talk about the connection between geometry and philosophy and cosmology and so-called sacred geometry, it seems a leap to most people to take on straight away. When you talk to somebody, who has no experience in these things, and you say, oh, I'm interested in this. If you might strike up a conversation, for example, about what you're up to and so on. Do you have a way where you explain to people how you can make this leap of something which is like geometrical squares and circles and triangles that goes so deep with regards to creation and cosmology and philosophy?
If I talk to people who are not acquainted with it, I am prepared to be kind of that I'm going to fail in that attempt to really get to the bottom of things. I think it's
Sure.
something that grows and I think there is. I think when what is perhaps the most profound change is that at some point you begin to see the beauty everywhere, and you have heard other people expressing that also, like in nature around you and
Yeah.
things like that. And if I am in that conversation as you suggest, I think I would sooner begin to point that out rather than keeping it in the geometry of things.
Okay.
Or like yeah. I think most people will understand harmony in music sooner than talking about
Yeah.
the golden mean or things like that on a two-dimensional plane. So yeah, when we, it's easier to express when people have already an affinity with it. That's for sure. Yeah, but
Sure.
I think sometimes with some people you feel that okay, I have this connection, and you kind of can begin to talk about it. Yeah. But
I like.
no,
Sorry,
it's you feel that when you talk to somebody, and then you kind of okay, we connect, and now I can take that further. Or you kind of make yourself vulnerable also if you talk to somebody who doesn't know you and begin to talk about crop circles and all things like that. There's always kind of this kind of okay, where can I talk about this in a safe way, or do I expose myself as some sort of idiot or something?
I know, even after all these years, I still get that cringe whenever I say, it's like I worked in television, and I worked as a journalist for Jaime Maussan, and I would do reports for, and they go, what was the subject? And when I go to say crop circles, I still get it. I still get, oh God, you're going to get this. I don't know if you've managed to see the episode I published last night.
I haven't had the opportunity yet. I was looking at the one that Scott and Jeff did with you for on their
that was a
forum.
That was a good episode. I really enjoyed chatting to them. But Jeff came on, and I published the episode with Jeff last night, and we talked for quite some time. And he's such a funny guy. When he sort of talks about, he said he tells the story of going to Devizes in Wiltshire for the first time, and he has a phone call with his wife, and his wife sort of says, so where are you then, Jeff? And he's like, well, I'm in this place called Devizes. So what are you doing there now then? He's like, well, I'm looking at these crop circles. I don't know, is this the latest thing now? Crop circle, and it's so funny. And he said he like so many people, the reaction you get from people when you say, he said, when I said mandalas, I talk about a Sri Yantra. He's got a necklace that's got a Sri Yantra. He says, everyone just goes, boring. And, that's it. But he said, when I say crop circles, they go, oh, my God, are you mad? They're all made with lawnmowers. And what are you doing messing around with those things? And you've got that massive barrier to overcome before you can even get into the beauty of the things that we're discussing here today, which is such a hurdle, isn't it? It really is.
And it's something that for us, it is something that we feel is very important because it has to do with the with a larger context of the way our culture is moving and all these things happening, and somehow we find kind of solace in this phenomenon that occurs.
Yes.
And that is also an aspect that you would like to bring out. I think
Really.
my universe would have been more bleak if it wasn't for crop circles, and I think that's such a beautiful thing. And I have it's not that it has become a religion or anything, but there is a spiritual element to that, and I think I enjoy being in that space, absolutely. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah, I mean, I have to say that it opened so many doors to me, one of which was the world that had been, to quote the Matrix, the world that had been pulled over my eyes to prevent me from knowing the truth, because the guy who took me to the crop circles was sort of the one that opened the door to me that, the media are not your friends. What's presented to you about the world you live in, about the meaning of your life, what your life purpose is. It's meaningless, or there's, you just go to work and then you earn some money, you pay the bills, and then you die, kind of thing. And there's nothing before and nothing afterwards. It's just a big
So
accident,
sad.
all that stuff, And
Yeah.
it's so depressing, but so many people just buy into that for the whatever reasons. But when the door opens and you go, "Hang on, maybe we've not been told the truth about this, maybe there's more to it," and the crop circles were the things that sort of opened the door, together with my teacher sort of pointing out these things to me. And it's that meaning, and I think that's why I eventually went on to study semiotics, because it's meaning, purpose, that really does make life worth living, isn't it? And as you say, with watching, I kind of saw things progressing the way they've progressed over the last 27 years with regards to world events. It wasn't like a psychic premonition, but it was like seeing where we were then and looking at the way those patterns of things would unfold in politics and world politics, commercialism and so on and so forth, and how we would associate ourselves with material reality rather than. It wasn't difficult to predict how that would unfold, and to be here 27 years later and to say, well, it has got worse and it is pretty bleak, and if it wasn't for the crop circles, I think I'd be in a pretty depressed state, to be honest.
I have that.
Yeah.
I have that impression too. It also played a role why I'm divorced now, but when I was married and we had two children, why we moved from the Netherlands to Norway. It was not so much to move that life in the Netherlands was bad or anything, but it had this feeling of society is kind of on. It's not on. I we didn't really feel at home anymore, and wanted to find values that we once had. I guess it was kind of this.
Uh-huh.
When you look back at it now, it feels kind of naive or something. But that was really important for us then to provide these values back to nature, if you will, and to make that world
Yeah.
to do that for our children and for ourselves. It felt as the right thing.
Yeah.
But so there are things that you can do, and I think it is so important to be aware of your thoughts, of your thinking, and to understand how a negative view on the world also eventually will help manifest the negative, in a very real way, and also in a kind of a subtle way, I guess. So, yeah, things that we can that we can do to keep our lives meaningful. That's I think that's very important. I have always worked in geriatric care, and
Mm-hmm.
to meet old people that lived a life with where they never had the opportunity to kind of express themselves or to develop themselves. It's an incredibly sad thing to observe. Whereas if you
Yeah.
meet people who have fought for their for self-realization, they're beautiful. That's and
Yeah.
so I think if I'm going, when I am old and look back at my life, I want to have that. I want to look back at something that was worth living, and that's. Um, I think we all try to strive for that, and it's very sad when people don't get that opportunity because of poverty or social isolation or things like that.
Sure.
I consider myself
Yeah.
incredibly lucky in that respect.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah, what you say makes me think of, I mean, it's fair to say that making the break from, the traditional to embark into the crop circles has been a tough journey, and yeah, along the way you think, oh God, life would have been easier maybe if I'd have just, towed the line and, done all these other things. But as it's gone on, the more and more it's gone on, it's defined me as a person that stood up for what I wanted to do, what I felt was meaningful, and whether or not anybody else sees that as meaningful, or whether or not they see that as, or whatever the way they see it, it's, for me, it's made me feel proud that I've, I turned right or turned left instead of going straight ahead with the way
Right.
everybody else sort of
Yeah.
flows or tells me. I guess there's a rebellious side of me that.
Yeah, and you had found that uh, that that niche that you felt at home. I think it was
Mm,
I think it was in that podcast you did with Jeff and Scott, um, about a moral compass. Now I can't really pick up
yes.
the context in which that was said now, but it had me thinking about that. That um, when we had just moved to Norway. We moved in 2004, and this was 2006. It was one of those moments
Hmm.
where that I can still remember very vividly, because it was one of those moments where all the windows in your mind kind of align and let a ray of sunshine in. I was
Yeah.
I was perfectly happy. Everything was fine. But when you have young children, your life is just getting to work, getting the children out of bed and all that. And in the evening you
Yeah.
pass out in front of the television, and that's kind of how your life goes. It's a spiritual desert, if you will. And so
Yeah.
I'm not complaining. I was very happy, and everything was fine. But I felt kind of this kind of a hole in me that needs to be filled, because there was always
Uh-huh.
spirituality had always been kind of a part of my life, and now I was in a period where there was nothing. And I remember that
Hmm.
it was a nice summer day, and I was walking my dog, and I was contemplating this, and suddenly it dawned on me. Yeah, what I feel, this nagging feeling of something missing, that has to do with what I then described as the spiritual compass. It has no direction. There's nothing that interests me. And I think it is one of those moments where perhaps you could describe it as a prayer, or perhaps just a general of a statement to the universe at large. Kind of, I'm going to give myself 6 months, and then I want to have found something that is going to that can be as a beacon or a point where that spiritual compass can point at. And I already felt much better just by acknowledging this. And in that period afterwards, two things happened that were very significant for me at the time. First, I learned about theosophy and the work of Elena Blavatsky, and I ordered the 2 volumes of the Secret Doctrine, and they arrived in my mailbox on December 21st, which was kind of it was a nice synchronistic touch to that, and that was. I know it is a disputed work, and it has a fair amount of fought a fair amount of criticism. You know, it's 100 years old by now, so it's a bit outdated. But for me, it was just what I needed. I devoured these 2 volumes during the winter of 2007, and then early spring 2007, I come home from work one evening, and my wife then was just kind of zapping through TV channels without really, finding something interesting. And I walk in and said, wait, go back and channel that. There was something interesting that catch my attention. There was this imprint in a field, and that was the documentary that Interconnectedness made. You talked about it.
Yes.
Right.
Crossovers
It was
from another dimension.
broadcasted not on national television, but on a nationwide commercial broadcast station. And that it was then when I got really introduced to crop circles, and know that I'm going to find out everything there is to know about. This is what I want to do, and I saw this geometry aspect of that. I can do that. I'm going to figure this shit out. So that's how it started. And this was 2007, and it was interesting for you. It was 1997 and 2007, and for me it was 2007. It started, and it was then that I began to look into this and really had found that spiritual compass. Not to make crop circles as something religious or anything, or to make it very very high up there, but it was a catalyst, and it has helped me looking into so much more things about our culture and history. You have a crop circle in a field, there's a building just beside it. What's that? Look into that, and there is so much more about our culture and about history that I have learned through crop circles as well. That is, it just never ends.
I know. That's one of the things, isn't it? When I say to people, if you start looking into these symbols and you just get curious, and you say, okay, I'll suspend the whole question of who's making them for now. Let me just start looking into this. And you do it for a while, then you realise you've picked up all this other information just by looking at this and looking at that, what was next to it, and looking at this, and you go, hang on a minute, I've actually absorbed a complete body of knowledge about stuff I never even thought was connected to this, but I can see the connections now where these symbols have drawn me to this and drawn me to that, and that's what's so clever about them, I think. And also, you've heard me say it probably several times, where I talk about Michael's phrase of phenomena A and phenomena B, and the way that our culture reacts to them tells us a great deal about where we are, and in terms of our understanding of ourselves, or our understanding of culture, or our understanding of life in general, and so on and so forth, looking at the responses. So even in that, I used to think, oh God, it makes me so frustrating, because I think if people can embrace these things, maybe we could make a better world, and and all these kinds of ideals. And then you go, no, I think we're getting exactly what we need to get, but by the way that they responded, by the way
Yeah.
people respond to them. Do you think that's
I
right?
think all this, you know, if 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 the crop circles had arrived in a way that everybody would have embraced it, it would probably have been detrimental for our culture and our
Mm.
development. So there is,
Mm.
I'm sure there is some function to this process of just a
Yeah.
few people here and there, and now with the
Yeah.
receding numbers every year, perhaps we're going into kind of a dormant phase. And I'm sure there is there is a reason for that, I guess. Um,
I often wonder if, there's a massive fascination with ancient monuments, which are there, they can be studied, but the people who built them, the things, they've been there a very long time, back in history. Maybe when crop circles are historical rather than contemporary, and then people can look back at the work you did, and the work, Alan and John Michelle and John Martineau and all these, like Michael Glickman, all these people that have done, Karen, that then they'll be valued more by people, because they're not something that's just
right.
happening every
Yeah.
year, and they're
And it
so
becomes more
prolific.
safe.
Yeah.
It's perhaps easier to understand something that is mysterious if it happened 100 years ago than that it's happening today. So
Yeah.
it probably will have some sort of incubating aspect to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that. Um, yeah, I think also in relationship with the UAPs phenomenon. Yeah, I think disclosure comes from within. I think it's and um, well, that whole process is kind of parallel to crop circles. Um, I think there is if we take the UAP phenomenon also from a Jungian perspective, the I think what lies ahead of us is much more strange than we can imagine right now. It's not just
Yes.
spaceship coming down making a pattern in a field. It
No.
has to do with the nature of reality and how we shape that.
Yeah.
And so let's
Yeah.
okay, let's just first get to this point where we on the social scale can accept that there is another intelligence than us. All right, and then
Mm-hmm.
the next step. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there is kind of a process here where we ourselves protect ourselves for not being damaged by that, because if everything there is to know about reality suddenly would drop in our heads would explode. You need to have
Explode.
you need to have a step by step, and I'm not sure if there is another guiding us there. Perhaps we can do that very well on our own. We protect ourselves and we know what we can handle, and that's why many people will automatically dismiss it, and some people will accept it and take that struggle. And yeah, and
Yeah.
I think culture or humanity works that way. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I, 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 I agree with you. I think, I know from my early days, I was overwhelmed with the
yeah,
weight of what it was really, and to hold it especially when you're trying to, communicate to others what you've found or what you've discovered, and they're so dismissive of it, and you're questioning yourself because they're questioning your sanity or to hold that on your own is huge because it's so paradigm shifting. But when, for example, as you say, if the UAP thing is progressing now, more and more people feel comfortable to talk about these things than they once did in some areas. And if it unfolds like in more, as you say, and I believe it will, I'm firmly of the camp that this is more Jungian than spaceships just coming here and crashing and leaving some, looking up people's backsides with torches for 100 years. I think there's a lot more to it than that. Then it paves the way, doesn't it, for us to start to accept collectively a bigger or wider reality, not just outside of us, but inside of us in consciousness, because that's this Jungian. I'm firmly of that camp. I really am. I like Jeffrey Kripal's work. I hope to get Jeffrey Kripal on the show one day, because this thing has always occurred to me. I've talked about it in lectures where it may be that whatever it is, this other intelligence, just over the history, presents itself to us in a way that stretches us, but is not out of reach. We can still kind of, whether it's Chupacabra in Mexico or whether it's mutilated cattle in Utah, or do you know what I mean? It's something that stretches us because we can't explain it. But
At the moment, you could say that the UAP phenomenon has more momentum than crop circles, but I think if we can just talk about our niche, our band of enthusiasts that are into crop circles, perhaps we are one step ahead because we perhaps it's easier for us to accept this change of reality. I think the whole consciousness discussion has gone on for some time in the crop circle world, and it's only now that it becomes to gain more speed at the UAP phenomenon. And I think UAP phenomenon, with its emphasis on disclosure from the government, if we don't need the government to disclose anything, we already know, but it kind of it is some sort of a compromise of not compromise. No, I'm looking for the word. I don't know. When we accept the existence of another intelligence, our worldview changes, but reality does not change necessarily. It just broadens. It's something that we weren't aware of previous is now brought in, but our world is still the same. And this process of with the citizen hearings, it's all very, very important stuff. But we keep ourselves then firm in our reality, and we try to remain in control while we gradually try to bring in this. But I think at some point we need to get to the point where we let go of that control and accept that reality itself may change when this is accepted on a social scale, on a cultural scale.
I agree with you.
I know that Jeff, I love him. He's such a gentle soul. But he often talks about being okay to not know, to be in that liminal space of not knowing. But that also is kind of a way of gardening, not gardening, but guarding your own reality. And I think the crop circles are trying to help to tell us, okay, it's okay to take the leap. It's okay to take a leap of faith and just let it go. And as an individual, we can be that, we can do that. We do that sometimes in our life, but as a culture, I think that there is a great potential there, and the future it can be very bright because of that if we can do that. And I hope it can. I've
I agree.
3 children. 2 of them are in their 20s now. I would like to have them for them to have a beautiful future. And I think we can do that. But we have to let go of things. We have to loosen the grip that we have on what we think is reality.
And this way I have the conflict with, I interviewed Steve Bassett, who is sort of instrumental in the citizen hearings and all these things. He's a lobbyist. He's not a UFO researcher. He's a political lobbyist to try and get the government to disclose what he believes they've got locked up in their files. Admirable work, and it's given him such a meaning and purpose. I can't believe how powerful and young and enthusiastic he is for a 77-year-old man. He does not look like he's 70, does he? I mean, he's like unbelievable, because it's given him this fire under his belly, and it just goes to show, if you've got that thing and that drive and that purpose, what it can do to your life. But when I talked to him on the podcast, I was saying I have trouble expecting people who've lied for so long or covered up what they've covered up for so long to then suddenly come out and start telling us the truth. When anybody lies to you once or twice, you're going to be skeptical about what they're going to say. But for these guys who are professional liars, from the CIA and the SA, why would we be sitting here waiting for them to tell us what we want to? So I struggle with that, and as you say, because we're in this, and I agree with you. The crop circle things have led us to a point where, without being conceited, I feel like we're in a slightly different place than the UAP phenomena, because we're not looking for that final piece of evidence which is just going to prove it's all happening. Because the analysis that you've done and the experiences we've had along the way that have encompassed so many other subjects that have brought this into a spiritual worldview kind of confirm this to us, that this is what the dialogue is about. It's about us,
and but not in the way like the continuation of our culture. There is a need for a more radical change, and
there's a need.
But nobody's going to do that for us. We need to do that ourselves. But perhaps
we do.
Perhaps crop circles are a bit about it. This on the other end of that leap. There's something beautiful there as well.
I agree. That's. It's funny that because whenever I hear that phrase, that's kind of how it started for me. There were wranglings of sort of weird intuition, let's say, that were happening to me in those early days in '97, and one of those was this phrase: "You need to take a leap of faith." And I didn't really know what that meant. I knew it wasn't a religious sense of a leap of faith, but I guess doing what I did was the leap of faith, and it's led to so much more that's enriched my worldview and my understanding of reality, that I feel it's already paid off, really, in that sense. And I just hope that other people can feel that too, really, in the future at some point.
Have you felt that it has enriched also this part where you with the martial art and this kind of this sense of energies and feeling another person and things like that?
I guess when I look at yes, it has, and there's been, whenever I get a serious intuition, it's funny that a lot of the internal martial arts from the practice I started back then is something called sensing hands or pushing hands, where you actually make physical contact with somebody, and you try to, the standing practice is a sense of grounding your feet, connecting you to the ground, and getting a sense of interioception where you feel inside your own body a lot more sensitivity to where you're feeling your body is in space, and how it's being affected by a physical push. And that leads on then to an energetic one, this energetic electromagnetic field that we have and that somebody else has. You get these kind of impressions, and the way that they filter through into your mind, into your conscious mind from sensing these people, is a process of trial and error, because you've never really sensed the world in that way before, sensed people in that way before. And so, the idea might come to you, let's say, as a lot of the time it will come to me as like a memory, right? So like, you'll feel something, and the impression I'll get in my mind, or the thought I'll have in my mind, is remembering something from the past that happened, okay? And then if I think, okay, because it happened so many times and then turned out to be what was happening to me in the present, but it was suggested to my mind, I want to say from somewhere, but I don't know where, but it came to consciousness, into my consciousness. I'll digress slightly, okay? When I was at university, I studied, as I say, I studied language and communication, and sort of semiotics was my thing. But I lived in university digs, and the landlord of the house was a biochemist who also was a psychologist and was writing a book on consciousness. But he didn't believe in anything woo-woo, nothing metaphysical. He believed in biology, and that DNA was just a patch on a patch, and we were just random accidents, okay? And he did me a lot of good, because to debate with a professor like that sharpened my sort of skills of how you had to be kind of like, concise and have your arguments well developed, because someone like that can just chew you up if you're not careful. So it was really good for me to learn to have respect for someone that had opposing views. There were so many levels. He was the most spiritual, unspiritual man I ever met in my life. Because he genuinely cared for people. He was genuinely moral and ethical, and so it was amazing. But his theory of consciousness was that, and I gave him this analogy, which he eventually used in his book, right? Or metaphor is probably a better example of it. But so the surface of the ocean is there, and he called the unconscious pre-conscious, okay? And so if you've got the surface of the ocean here, and there's the air, and then you've got sort of the depths of the ocean going down, okay? What he suggested popped into consciousness had to have an emotional tag. So if you think of a flying fish that jumps out of the water, that becomes a thought in consciousness, whilst it was in pre-conscious, what pushed it into consciousness was an emotional tag, an affective tag. So, for example, but that's why we get a lot of thoughts that pop into our mind. I must pay that bill. Oh my God, I'm going to be late for so and so, because those emotional tags drive it into our conscious mind, and I really accept that. But when these intuitions come, for example, using the martial arts or sensitivity of people, they would come with an emotional tag that was of a past memory. But they would be. I found out over time that the pattern of that was that the memory of the past event, or a conglomeration of a memory and something new added to it, was really the impression I was getting right now. And I just needed to forget that it was a memory and think, oh, I'm being reminded of what I'm experiencing right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it's. I don't have that. Recognition of kind of these energetic things. So
Yeah.
for me, it's not something that I am acquainted with. But I can guess if you
Right.
if you sense something that is not from your normally sensory input, that your mind I think I would approach it from another direction, because I would have thought that your mind does not know where something comes from, so it needs to have some sort of tag to explain it for you. It's a reference.
Yeah.
But you kind of turn
Yeah.
it around and make that connection on a subconscious level.
I'll give you an example, a current example, right? I went to a music festival at the
Gary,
weekend.
I'm just going
And
to put on the lights in my living room. It's getting really dark now.
Sure. It's getting dark. Yeah, okay. That's great. That's better.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll give you. It's fine. I'll give you a recent example. Very recent, actually. And it's kind of like you could think of this in a sort of spooky way, really. But so I went to a music festival at the weekend. Okay, haven't been to a festival for a number of years. I used to go all the time. I used to take the children to all sorts of festivals. I used to teach Tai Chi. I used to get a free ticket to teach Tai Chi. And I took the kids to festivals where they learned to juggle, they learned to drum, they learned to fire twirl, they'd be outside under the stars at night and fires and all those things, right? The kids grew up there, all my 3 kids. And so it was a cheap way. I didn't have a lot of money. I was working around crop circles and I had a little bit of a kitchen job here in the winter, and I'd work for Jaime Maussan doing some correspondent work, maybe take a few tours around crop circles. So it was always a bit of like juggling how I could pay the bills and, keep the kids from sitting in front of computer games and TVs, and try to get them outside. So festivals were the one, and I'd get a ticket because I was a teacher. So, and you meet all sorts of weird and wonderful people. And I think when human beings are on a field, they get that sense of freedom. Their spirit opens up a little bit, and coincidences can happen. Magical things can happen more than they do if you're just in your routine every day, where your kind of spirit gets compressed, right? So I like that, and those things did happen. Anyway, I'm on my way to this music festival with my son, and he's 35 now. And we reminisced on a time when back in 20 years ago, probably. It was a big festival here called the Big Green Gathering, and we put our tent up, and we had our sort of area camped out, and then there was this sort of like security guy who was a bit overzealous, who came along and said, you can't have your tent there like that. It's you're 6 inches over this imaginary line, okay? And you need to take all of your stuff down and move it 6 inches that way. And it was like, are you having a laugh? This is nuts. For what reason? There's no, and he was really insistent. And the people who were camping next to us, who'd got a load of kids and put all their stuff up, he made them, because they didn't have a living vehicle as a part of their sort of arrangement, he made them take it all down and move, right? And they had to get it all down and move. He wasn't a very nice man, this guy. He was just well overzealous. And then as soon as they moved, having wasted a day at the festival, someone just came along and camped there anyway with their tents, and so it was all a wasted exercise. Anyway, I didn't. I picked up the edge of this tent. I moved a few things, and so it made it look like I'd now come across this imaginary line, and it was sorted out. And we were reminiscing on this on the way there. Do you remember when that was happening? That was 20 years ago. Of all the memories we could have had, we reminisced on that one, right? Or I did. So we turn up at this new festival to the weekend. Friday we got there. And as we pull up, we got a van and we got a bell tent to go up next to it, okay? So we put the van in, and this woman walks up to us, who's security, with a radio, and she says, okay, there are allocated spots here, and you need to stay within these lines, right? And we're like, what lines? And so there was a little sort of line like this, and a little one off like that, like a T shape here, and then on the other side another one, but it wasn't parallel. One at the front was off by about 3 feet, right? So all the vans to our right were all nice and straight with tents, and we were sort of like lining up with them. But this woman said, no, you need to conform to this line. And I'm saying, well, but we can't conform to this line because it's not straight. Oh, you're getting funny with me. Do I need to call security? And she started getting all like this, right? And it was just uncanny how this memory of a past event from 20 years ago actually transpired and happened as soon as we arrived.
Did that because you had this memory with it, and perhaps this relationship with the martial art, did you respond differently now? did you respond in a way that kind of solved the situation, or was it?
Well, but yeah, and this is probably just me getting a little bit older because I'm a fiery kind of guy in a lot of ways, and so I I remained calm. But as you tried to have a conversation with him, my son actually said, because she said, "Oh, you're getting funny. I need to call seriously." My son said, "Hang on a minute, we're just trying to have a conversation. We're trying to point out to you that if we move our van like that, we're not going to conform with all these others, and then the next people that come, it's all going to knock it all out." But she wasn't having any of it. So she called somebody else over who then asked us to conform to this line. But even though we were trying to explain this line, she was going, "Oh, I've got lots of things to deal with and you should know." We were like, hang on a sec. You're... And then somebody else came. And then the third person that came, who seemed more senior, kind of realised that, that we were being asked to do the impossible, and said, "Look, if you could just do your best to keep it over there, that, within this line." And we were like, "Yeah, okay then." And then everybody turned up, and then nobody, and it was only to us that this happened. Nobody else got this hassle. So it was just strange that I'd had this memory of this past event, and then when we turned up, it happened to us very directly again. And that's an example, a kind of current example of what I'm saying to you about sometimes what you can feel off people. I might have a memory of somebody when I'm pushing hands with them that will come up like a past memory, but it will actually relate to what's about to happen in front of me in a funny kind of way. I can't explain it any more than that because it's a bit strange.
I can
Really,
see what you mean now, and I kind of how does that, if you can take that, if we can take that back to crop circles, like how they connect in ways that we can't see, or connect with the past, or with past events and things like that. It's all, yeah. I guess how we relate to people, how we respond to people is so has so many different dimensions to it. Yeah.
There was an example with the actual Hampton formation. I think in 2014. I think it was a formation at Edgehampton that had like 12, almost like 12 heads and shoulders around, as if 12 people were sitting around a circle looking in on something. Okay, and so Janet Ossebard was inside the formation with some people that she'd brought over from Holland, and Randall from Holland also was inside the formation looking around, and I walk in, and prior a few weeks before that, Janet had had an operation on the back of her neck. Okay, this isn't the same example, it's just one of these coincidences about time and the past and the future, right? So I'll bring up this for that reason. She'd been posting a picture of this operation she'd had on the back of her neck, on her spine or something, right? And, showing the stitches and the scar and stuff like that, right? Posting it on there. So I walk in and I saw Janet. And I said, "Oh, hi, how's the neck?" She turned around, showed me the scar. And I've got this scar on my leg from an old operation I had on my knee, right, which is probably about 3 times the size of the scar that she had. I said, "That's not a scar," I was joking. I said, "This is a real scar. Have a look at this," right? And I showed her this scar on my leg, okay? So she looked down, "Oh, yeah, I'll go. What happened there?" I said, "I broke my leg years ago." Then Randall walks over and says, "That's not a scar. Have a look at this." And he drops his trousers, right? And oh my God, he looked like his legs had been eaten by a shark, right, in the past. So there's these two people, probably in their 50s, maybe even a little older, sitting down, Dutch people that Janet had brought over, just sitting down, whilst all this was going on. Randall drops his trousers. "Oh my God, Randall, you win the competition. What the hell happened to you, right?" So he says, "I was in Amsterdam and I was at a party 20 odd years ago, and we were out on the balcony at this party, and there were too many people on it, and the balcony collapsed and smashed my legs up, and I had to have lots of operations and have my legs all rebuilt and blah, 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 blah," right? Oh, blimey, that sounds, horrendous. Lucky you were alive, sort of thing. So then the guy who's sitting on the floor says something to Janet in Dutch, right? And so then Janet responds, and you can see that she's looking a bit surprised. Huh? And then Randall joins in, and they all start sort of talking to each other in Dutch, and I haven't got a bloody clue what they're saying. And they're all sort of, you could see by the expressions on their faces that there was some shock and surprise. Okay, and then Randall walks over and shakes this man's hand. Okay, so I said, Janet, come on, fill me in. What's the story? Turns out that the man who's sitting down was the lawyer who settled the compensation claim for Randall 20 years ago, but he'd never met him and he never knew him. It was a class action for a lot of people, right? So if I hadn't have walked in and said to
would
Janet,
never.
how's the neck? And she talked about the scar and shadow of my neck, and then Randall had to come over and touch hers, he would have never known that the man he was standing next to was the lawyer who settled his claim from years ago inside a crop circle.
Oh, what a beautiful story. It's something that you kind of expect in a crop circle to happen, right? It's something that it's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's sort of about the past, you see. It's like 20 years ago, current, right? Talking about the scar that's current. Me talking about the past, and then it brings it all together in the now inside a crop circle.
It makes you wonder what I know Dan Vidler. He always looks at these alignments.
At the lay.
Yeah, but also with where figure out exactly where a crop circle is, and a radial line in design, and then continues that, where does it end up? And he has also stories of connecting it very intimately, which is also often kind of difficult to talk about with others. The story that you tell now, Initial Hampton, when this coincidence, people meeting, that's an awesome story, right? But if you experience that a crop circle, that the placement of a crop circle there aligns with something that is something of a personal event, then it becomes more difficult to express, because you think you're kind of special or something, And
exactly.
We need to kind of make a space where it is all right to talk about that without being exposed as something, as somebody who's full of himself or something. Because many people experience this in some way, and that
I believe
specific crop circle has some very tangible and specific relation with somebody. At the same time, it can mean a myriad of different things for other people, and has to do with astronomical observations or history or whatever. But it also this ability to have this very intimate connection as well is something that is often very interesting to listen to, but it becomes more difficult to talk about. And there is this difference between the story in Initial Anthem that you tell, which just makes it, what an awesome story, and experiencing a specific relationship with a crop circle that feels very intimate, but you can't really express it. It remains something. It remains something intimate. You can't really express that in a way.
You're right in saying that. It doesn't. We do need to make a space, because I believe there are. I mean, Michael talked about stories, where there's been. Those of us that have been around them long enough have a personal story where it's felt like it's spoken directly to us. I mean, 777. I mean, Paula and Wim were there, but what led that day, and it was just very personal. And I've had other personal experiences, and I know that lots of other people have, and it's good that you realise that other people have in that intimate way, because otherwise you can feel you could lose your mind thinking it's a bit messianic or something like that. So it's good that it humbles you away and says, no, look, we're all special, and if we engage with these things, we all get this personal touch. I acted as a guide, as you know, for many years, taking people to crop circles, which was a great sociological experiment for me too, because having examined my own thoughts and feelings and what happens to me before, I was taught to experience crop circles like a psychedelic trip. Pay attention to what happens to you before you take the plant, what happens to you during it, and then what happens in the debrief afterwards. That 3-stage, 3-act story. You know, you've got to pay attention to all of it. So approaching a crop circle, when I left my home, you know, I used to have to drive 70 miles to go to crop circles until I moved to Wiltshire. So the moment I left my home, you know, what happened to me with a personal interaction with somebody in a service station on the way for getting a coffee, if something, you know, happened, I would order the memory of all of those experiences to see if at the end of it there was a context with something that coincidentally happened to me in that coffee shop compared to, you know, afterwards go, oh God, that actually was connected. There's a connection between. Do you know what I mean? So that was how I was taught to approach them. So when I got to sort of be a guide to people and take people to crop circles, I could watch their reactions or hear their stories of what brought them or what happened to them on the journey to get there and so on. You know, and I found that the same patterns would often be the case. And one that springs to mind is a journalist called Ginger Casey. She's died now, but she was a very famous sort of news journalist in the United States. And I met her in, I think, 2008 or 9. It's a bit blurry now, the year. I think, no, it would have been a bit later, probably about 2010, actually, because my daughter was living with me then in Wiltshire. And so I said to her, you know, what brought you to the crop circles? You know, you got on a plane and come all the way from the States. You know, is this? She'd sort of retired as a journalist then. So I said, it's not for news. What brings you here? And she said, well, my mother died, you know, a while back, and I kept sort of being woken up in the night with this thought in my mind about fractals. She said, I don't know what fractals. I got up and Googled fractals, and these crop circles began to appear as pictures, you know, on the screen. So I looked into them and thought, what the hell's going on with these? So I better go over and check them out. So there she was, right? And she'd hired me. She met Michael. Michael said, you need Gary as your guide. So I took her out for the day. And I first of all took her to that formation. I think it must have been 2010. Do you remember that formation that looked like it was half? It was like lots and lots of circles that then ended at the fence,
Right.
as if it was
Yeah.
half a formation. Took her to that first, and I'll never forget, because, you know, she was just this like, you know, regular human being, until she said to me, will you hold my camera while I just talk to the camera? And I said, yeah, sure. And I held the camera up, and then she just became this personality that used to speak in front of the camera for all of her working career, you know, just became this like, here I am in Wiltshire, and it's like, wow, God, she's a professional, you know. And she recorded this piece talking about what I'd pointed out to her, the, you know, uneven lay of the land, and the circles weren't really circles and all that sort of stuff. So then I took her to the owl formation that was in Woodbury Hill. And then along the road in Stanton St Bernard was the hummingbird. And so what I used to do was I used to try and avoid telling people what the formation was and let them walk around in it, and then sort of say to them, you know, what do you think? You know, what do you think you're standing in? And then show them the picture to get that reaction of, oh my God, no way would I have envisioned that. So I did that with the hummingbird. And she walked around, and I let her walk around. She came over to me eventually and said, you know, what are we standing in? So I pulled the picture up of the hummingbird, and she just broke down and cried. And it's not the first time I've seen, you know, people break down and cry. They laugh, they cry, they do cartwheels. You know, they get very, you know, all different reactions, headaches. So okay, so sort of consoled her and said, you know, what's going on? So she said, my mother my whole childhood was punctuated with my mother putting hummingbirds everywhere, fridge magnets, pictures, paintings, statues. Hummingbirds was her thing. So she saw this connection between what had woken her mum dying, her having these intuitions of fractals that then got her up out of bed at 2 or 3 in the morning to look at fractals on a computer, and crop circles come up, making her fly to England, having this experience with me and talking about the things that, you know, I talk about, and then taking her to a formation that was of a hummingbird.
Our logic mind tries to find that connection, like there is some, there apparently there is a connection between the the event of her mother dying and the appearance of the hummingbird crop circle, and then all the events that lead to her getting there. And I'm thinking about this, this what we talked about this Jungian aspect of that this process, what is happening now, will profoundly change reality, I think, when we make the leap. And this is an example of that somehow, that linear events, that the linear causality of events somehow connects differently with people when we emotionally tag ourselves, to use and I think the analogy that you make with the fish jumping out of the ocean kind of could be used as some sort of a template to understand these kind of events, perhaps why these happen, how these happens. We are not. It's not, the hummingbird was not just for her, but it nevertheless made this very intimate connection. And I think, as you say, when if people engage with the crop circle phenomenon, this happens.
It happens.
I've experienced that as well quite early when I started looking at them, and it really was a great validation for me. Okay, this shit is real. This is it was. I can tell the story if there's time. Yeah.
Of course, there's time. Carry on.
I had just received the AutoCAD program that I used to draw on the computer. I got an old copy from my brother, which I'm very fortunate to have. So I was looking at not just at crop circles, but also I wanted to make find a way to the nodes of the diatonic scale were drawn as concentric circles, to find a way to find them geometrically.
Mm-hmm.
So the octave, that's very easy. You have a circle, you draw an equilateral triangle in it, and then a circle in that. These two circles are going to have a 2-to-1 proportion. Yep. That's the octave. All right.
Yep.
And then if you draw a square circle, that is going to be half an octave, so that is C F sharp.
Yep.
Which is a dissonant, which is kind of funny because sacral architecture is all about square, odd quadratum, and all that. But if you translate it into music, it's a dissonant that falls right in between the perfect fourth and perfect fifth. And this is sometimes this is the name for that ratio is this tritone, but it's sometimes referred to as the devil's note because of it's a dissonant, and it falls right in between the two harmonics of the perfect fourth and fifth.
Yep.
And then it kind of stopped. I could not find anything more about this, and there weren't any polygons that connected to any of these notes. I was about to give up on the whole project. Then, and at that time, I just took every photo or drawing that I saw of a crop circle, and they were all just put in one folder with no regard to date or name or whatever. It was all just dropped in, randomized. And I was looking at I was scrolling through this, and I saw a formation with a hexagon, a standing hexagon, and then an horizontal placed hexagon wedged in between. So two nested hexagons. And I thought, okay, circle, two nested hexagons, and a circle. But I haven't tried that. Let's try that. And this gives you a CF. So now I had a semitone, and that allowed me to reconstruct the whole of the octave to find every other note. So kind of I had solved this problem.
Okay.
Which I didn't talked about it with my wife probably, but this was not shared with anyone other than that. Then the next day, I go on the crop circle connector and to see if there are any new circles, as how that goes. And there was one at the place at the Devil's Den.
The Devil's Den. I was just going with the circles, the sixfold.
Right.
I know the
and
one
this,
you're talking
but this,
about. I think,
this new one that had come that was the 2008, a circle with a smaller circle and a curved line connecting the two. And the way it was placed in regard to the trem lines, when I saw it, the first reaction was, oh, it's just like a music note. Okay, and the crop circle connector kind of specific name. That this was the first time in what was it, 9 years then that the crop circle had appeared at that location without being specific about it. But as you know now that the same circle I was looking at the previous day was there, and I felt the hairs on my arm rising because you feel that they are picking up on this. How is that possible? I think it helped it somehow also that I was looking at that formation at the same date that it had appeared 9 years before. Also kind of
really
helped or kind of emphasized this. Years later, in 2000, this was 2022. I take my first trip to England, and I'm visiting the Devil's Den. We stayed in Marlborough and we took a hike to go to visit the West Kennet Long Barrow and Silver Eel and all that, and also the Devil's Den. And we took a break there, and it was no crop circles whatsoever. Nothing mysterious happened, but it was a beautiful place, and I really wanted to stay there. I didn't want to leave, but you at some point you just need to move on, of course. So we did that, and then the next day we went back there, and it's this almost tangible feeling. I really, really just want to be here. I don't want to go. It was about a year later or so that I suddenly realized that there was no synchronicity happening there other than one I had brought with me myself. Because that day I was looking back at some photos, and that day I was wearing a T-shirt with one of the engravings that Gustav de Rey had made for the Divine Comedy of Dante. I had a T-shirt with one of the prints on that, and it shows Dante and Virgilius on the lowest terrace of the Inferno just before they meet Lucifer. So I brought the devil kind of with me to the Devil's Den.
Wow.
No,
you didn't really realize that at the time.
That T-shirt that was on top of the pile, so I just and it was kind of putting things together, because the Divine Comedy also kind of is one of those books that kind of sticks with me for many reasons. And but this whole thing with music, the diatonic scale, this reference to the devil and all that kind of beautifully came together. It was fun,
I get you. And it's those separate things, like you didn't even know you were wearing that T-shirt, but the connection back to the devil and you wanting to give up. You get into that point where you're about to give up, and then found this sixfold, and then 666. This connection to
all these things kind of come together in the end. And
They do, don't they? And there's always still that get out, isn't there? There's always like, oh, well, there's just coincidences where someone can just dismiss it, and then there's that personal interaction yourself where
it's when you
you know
feel it happen, when it's happening to you, you kind of you don't need any confirmation. You don't need to be convinced of anything. It feels very real, and it doesn't need to be explained. But to get back to this point, we need to have a space where we can talk about this, because for me it is a very significant part of my journey into crop circles and into spirituality in general. But when I tell this story to you now, I know within the context of this conversation that I can tell this story. But as I am telling it, I think, oh my God, people listening to this, they're gonna think that this is a boring story. But the point is that for me it was very significant at that time, and this personal, intimate connection makes it such a real event. And I think people listening to this kind of encourage them to go on that journey themselves as well, because it happens if you let it happen.
It does.
Yeah.
If you let it. And I think you're right. You see, well, I'd go further and say I know you're right, because if we by opening up and telling these stories that we both have just now, for those people that decide they're going to look into the crop circles further, and by the way, I'll give a plug here. I've just signed a contract with an American TV company to do a half-an-hour a week TV show called Take a Second Look, which will be sort of like different. I can't put the same content on my Against the Grain podcast that I can put on there, but I got to put something that's unique, because eventually it'll be a sort of subscription channel that's going to sort of be like Gaia TV. There's a lot of other speakers and shows that will be on it, but I've got this one on there. And so Take a Second Look is like a way of saying to people, okay, there may not be so many crop circles about for you to run around in like we had back in the day, but I firmly believe if you start to dive into them, doing some geometry with Karen and Jeff, maybe looking at the pictures, telling stories, something personal will still happen. Something intimate will still happen. And when it does, hearing us talk about it will then give them validation for the fact that, these things do happen, and they can feel more comfortable with it.
We should encourage people to do that, but we also should encourage ourselves to share this material, because we always going to affect each other one way or the other, and
we do
let it just
one
be
way or the
something
other
positive, and something positive will come out of it. Yeah, sure.
My early days, my teacher was very wise in saying to me, when I first got involved from 1997 to 2007, I spent 10 years without really, apart from trying to convince my ex-wife and my friends at that time that, there's something going on with the crop circles, to no avail, of course, because it was just crazy. But he was wise to tell me not to share the very deeply personal stories, to hold on to them until I'd got myself grounded in the phenomenon, that I knew that there was something going on before I shared those personal stories. Because when you haven't got them locked down, to use his phraseology, and you try to share them as if you want validation from other people, which they're not going to give you, you can lose it. You can lose it because you'll doubt yourself. And so it served me in those early years to hold on to some of the more personal ones, and there's quite a few of them I still haven't shared. And even when you saw me give my martial arts presentation, that was the first time that I'd shared quite a few personal stories, and that's after 20 odd years. Do you know what I mean? I felt, okay, it's all right for me to do that now. I don't feel like I'm going to lose anything, or I'm going to lose a part of myself, or doubt myself. Do you know what I mean? So there is a balance to be drawn. with anybody that gets involved in the early days to be careful about who they share it with, because
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
will try to take it away from you, not because,
I think that's
yeah,
also one of the reasons why I don't engage in the discussions on social media, because it is so often that some it's you only need one laughing emoji like to ruin the whole thing, and it
yeah,
is such a shame that
yeah,
these that people get affected in a negative way, and I don't want to spend time in that
no,
environment. So I kind of created my own then. But yeah, I get that you need to be careful with these kind of things as well.
yeah,
What is precious
yeah,
to you?
you
Yeah, keep it precious at
yeah,
least. And yeah.
keep it, because you're going through a transformation, and the paradigm shift that you're taking will need you to be certain and have some things locked down with your own experiences and the order of your memory with those experiences. And so, yeah, if you run off trying to tell everybody, because of your insecurity about what's happened to you, and you're looking for validation, you're not going to get it, and it will water down and dilute that experience for you to the point where
Yeah,
you'll doubt that it
yeah,
happened.
it
Or
ruins it. Yeah, I can see.
so,
I
yeah,
can see
that's
that.
my, yeah. Uh, okay, one final thing, Peter. When you're going to write a book about all your work?
I have the feeling. Yeah, I have a book in me, but what I wonder what that book would be about. Just
You know,
showing that okay, the area of crop circles is used intentionally in the design. Is that enough to fill a book? Or I don't know. I haven't really got the um, the topic for the book just yet. I could easily fill a whole bunch of just take this crop circle and let's analyze that, or write some sort of an essay about it or something. But I feel that if there's going to be a book, it's going to be about something, and I haven't really figured out what that is going to be. Because if I'm going to write about
okay.
the mathematical side of it, you called me a geometer earlier, but a geometer is a mathematician with a degree in geometry. I am pretty far from that. Um, so if I'm going to publish a book about geometry, I feel that I need to gain a little more weight on that topic. Just yet. I think I think
I can relate.
I think in relation to that, or continuing on that thought, I tend to avoid using the name sacred geometry. I think the
Mm,
mathematical field of geometry is so much wider, broader, and deeper than the kind of confined zone that we refer to as sacred geometry. And if
mm-hmm.
mathematics is the language of creation, then per definition, all everything is sacred geometry. All geometry is sacred geometry. Whether something is sacred or not depends on the intention that you take with you. But anyway, I think if I'm going to write a book about geometry, I need to have more more knowledge about that. Uh, so I haven't really landed on it. Right.
I mean, I hear you, and I understand, because I think what's always held me back from sort of writing a book is, well, there's been a bunch of reasons, but one of them is always like, well, I need to get a bit more. I'm not quite ready yet. And I've said it so many times. And I've written a book, and I've written stacks of stuff, but I'm always like, it's not quite right.
Yeah, I think
You
I
know,
think
um,
we probably need to get past that, right? Okay,
I think so.
this
I
is
think
good
I think
enough.
there's a
Okay, let's
yeah.
let's just
There's
put
a
it
there's
out
a,
there. But I just haven't
yeah.
haven't written it yet. But the thought has occurred, and okay, I probably have a book in me somewhere. It's just not.
I certainly think you have. I think from my perspective, you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice there, because I think that you've made a huge contribution, Peter, to the analysis in my world, and I know other people's, right. And I love
Yeah.
publishing your work on my Facebook
Thank you
page
for
and
that.
stuff.
Yeah.
I really do. No, I really, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure for me. I mean, I thank you for doing it so that I can share it with people. But, the commentaries that you make, they started off kind of like quite small, and they've grown, and your explanations of, and your articulation of how you approached it, and how you wrestled with this, and then you tried this, and that, mate, that's really, that in itself, I think, is
Cool.
valuable to
It's
people.
nice to hear.
And yeah, it is, and I'm sure, I'm 100% sure that Karen and Jeff and Scott will watch this podcast, and they will say the same. Which to me means that then there is a book there, probably several, and that your one book might be about your compiled works of geometric analysis from Peter van den Burg of crop circles from this year to that year, right? But then some of the other stuff that you've talked about with regards to some of the coincidences, some of the stories along the way, and some of the deeper connections to philosophy and cosmology and so on, they're all there, mate. You've just talked about them, so rethink that one, because I think you got
it's
it.
very
I
kind
really
of you to
do.
say that, and yeah, at some point it may transpire. Yeah. It would be nice
I hope so.
to collect stories of other people. Like this is my personal story about crop circles. It means nothing for other people, but for me this is very valuable. That would be a nice angle, perhaps, because many people will have such a story and would love to have that written down somewhere.
Well, it's what came to my mind as you said that was that phrase. I can't remember who said it. It's a wonderful phrase that's quoted in a film that I can't remember the title of either. It's about a teacher, where it says, if you let your own light shine, you give people permission to let theirs shine too. So by allowing that light that lit up in you to shine with those stories, you'll validate and allow people to go, maybe I can do that too then.
Yeah. And sometimes somebody approaches me through that Facebook page, and it is and gives a hint of that. Okay, I have meant this post has meant something for somebody on the other side of the planet. What a wonderful thing. What a beautiful world we live in, and all these possibilities that we have.
Absolutely.
Us talking, we have perhaps 1,000 kilometers between us, but we're talking in real time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's just use that to help other people shine. Instead of clashing with one
exactly.
another.
Yeah. No. Thanks very much, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
It's always fun. I can easily fill 2 hours talking with people talking about crop circles when the context is right. So it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for doing this.
Oh no, it's my pleasure, and that's the reason I do this podcast. Really, I think that the time is right. Karen Alexander gave me the final push to actually get this all set up. She was, I got all the equipment for another project I was going to do with my son, and then his business took off, and he didn't have time to do it, and so I was toying with the idea, and then Karen just gave me that little push, and here we are with Against the Grain podcast.
Beautiful. Yeah, and some of you have mentioned some names of people who are coming, and you at Jeff and all that. So that's getting interesting.
It's I've Michael Schneider. I want to get Michael Schneider on. I was going to mention him just a moment ago when you talked about sacred geometry, because he gives a wonderful description at the beginning of his book, Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, where he gives a very good example of sort of qualitative mathematics, then sort of philosophical mathematics, and then so-called sacred geometry and sacred mathematics, and and it helps to look at, you know, those descriptions to see what people are trying to get at when they call it sacred geometry.
It's a definition that can mean whatever you want, I guess. And there isn't really an historical context to use it. It's a name that we have been using for a few decades to compartmentalize something we have been doing for thousands of years. And in that way, it may be something as an inspiration for some, but it can also function as a limitation on creativity. Because you're not allowed to measure whatever. If that helps you, measure the damn thing, right? It's all these kind of self-implied rules, and the name also implies dogma, but nobody knows what it is. So I think it's a name that has had its value, and we probably should be on the lookout for something else rather than sacred geometry.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. Yeah, a redefinition of that, or a requalification of what it means. I always think of it as when I heard about the octave, first of all, the octave bypasses the intellect, and we recognize it as a harmonic interval. And so what's wired into consciousness is, this intangible part of ourselves is to recognize harmony, both audibly with an octave and visibly with an octave in terms of space with two circles. If something outside of us in the world resonates with something inside of us in that mysterious world of consciousness, that makes it sacred. That's what I always thought of those two things, because and again, the word sacred doesn't do it justice, but it's sacred in that this creation that joins those two things together with a recognition of harmony or disharmony inside of us and outside of it, joins those two things together, is this kind of sacred aspect to it. That's what I always thought of with regards to why it was called sacred geometry.
I can see that it has to it needs to have some sort of connection with something, with the bigger picture and the whole.
With the wider world. So the 5813, 5813's on pineapple cones. It beats out with Venus. It's on the the most plants have got this 5813 connection, and our teeth having 5813, and that inside and outside of us, the creation of us and the creation of the physical world as well. That connection is I think why they call it sacred. But I agree with you. It's got too much dogma attached to it, and people just think it's religious or whatever, and then you can't get over that hurdle before you start to really see the magic of it. Good talk, Peter. Thanks so much for joining me. I look forward to your next analysis of the next crop circle.
Let's see. I'll be in England a few days next week, so I hope to visit the one at Stonehenge, and I hope something new will pop up as well. So.
I got a feeling it will, and if I'm working full time during the days, and my days and my evenings are tied up with either recording these or editing them, so I'm pretty busy. But
at some point, I'm staying in Winchester, so I'm not in the neighborhood of Bristol.
Okay.
Really, but,
No, it's a bit of a way. I've got brothers and sisters that live in Winchester, but I don't get to get down there so much anymore. Okay.
Good.
All right, my friend. Well, I'll switch off now. I'll say goodbye to you, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon in the future.